What are the hard realities of the racetrack? The first hard reality is that it's a non-profit business for thoroughbred owners. That's the first and biggest problem. The reason it is a big problem for everyone is because if owners don't make money, they can't pay their bills. They can't pay the trainer, they can't pay the veterinarian, they can't afford to buy horses at the next auction sale, and so prices at the auction sale drop, plummet like mad as soon as the great majority of owners realize that they're getting taken for millions of dollars a year. So that's got to change. If thoroughbred business is going to be a viable business for every participant, then the first thing that has to change is the owner situation has to develop into at least a potentially profitable situation. Now you think about why is it not a profitable business for owners? The main reason is that the raw material, the expensive raw material, falls apart very quickly, so that you don't have very many John Henrys that race until they're 9 and over the years accumulate millions of dollars worth of winnings. Instead, you have most of the horses failing to get to the races to start with. And the ones that do are typically precocious animals. They break down first. The best ones break down first. And then the ones that survive that with still some aches and pains and some quick fix drugs gluing them together for a while, as they continue to campaign, they slowly fall apart, their performances fall apart, and they slow down, stop winning races, and then you find them in you find $1 million purchases in $10,000 claiming races, or in the market, in the meat market. Jumping over hurdles in some little girl's backyard. That's got to change. You can't run a business for very long without having mutual benefit for the participants. And the main participant in horse racing, other than the betting public, is the owner of the racehorse. He's the one that feeds everybody at the racetrack, feeds all the trainers, the veterinarians. Everybody's bills get paid by the owner. The second thing that happens is the chaos produced by the fact that owners, once they realize they're being taken, and once they realize that they're losing millions of dollars, they hop from trainer to trainer. So you get a chaotic marketplace where every trainer hates his competition because last week his best owner moved to the guy down the shed row over an argument about a horse or an argument about non-profitability or whatever, but it's a chaotic marketplace, especially for trainers. And there's no, you can certainly see why most trainers are nervous as hell about horse racing and about criticism and about how they do things compared to the guy down the shed row. I'd be nervous too if I didn't know what I was doing and was producing catastrophic losses for all my customers. I'd be worried about my competition trying to come in and take away what little goodwill I have remaining. I mean, you can win all the Eclipse awards in the world, but if every year you take $80 million worth of raw material and turn it into $20 million worth of wins, somebody loses $60 million. And if you do that year after year, pretty soon everyone realizes that this is not a business proposition. This is a place to give away millions and millions of dollars. Now, why do we have this situation? My view is that we have this situation because focus has been put in the wrong area. For decades now, the breeders have ruled the thoroughbred racing world. In standardbred racing, it hasn't been so. The breeders haven't run that because it's farmers in their backyards and the Amishmen and people like that who were building racehorses, and they weren't trading in millions of dollars. They were trading in $600 animals, $1,000 horses, $2,500 horses. Only recently have standardbreds been selling for upwards of $1 million. Some very few standardbreds. But in the thoroughbred business, the breeders have had control, and it's very typical of the thoroughbred industry that outrageous prices are paid for horses that will never run a step. The very first $1 million horse to earn $1 million back in racing just happened recently. Until then, there was never a horse that was paid $1 million or more for that ever won back its purchase price. The central technology of athletics is exercise science. Now, the central technology of thoroughbred racing in this country has been breeding. And the philosophy of breed the best to the best and hope for the best is not even good genetics. What genetics says, if you breed the best to the best, what you're going to get is the mediocre of the two families, the middle-of-the-road performer of the two families, a regression to the norm. That's what they call it. And that's the science of genetics. Always you can expect a regression to the norm of the families of the two individuals that are being bred. There's only one other factor that really plays a part in performance, and that is hybrid vigor, where you line breed and then crossbreed. After you've spent a decade line breeding two outcrosses, then you breed them together, and 1 out of 20 of those animals might turn into Godzilla, and the other 19, hey, you might have one with two heads. You don't know, but hybrid vigor is another significant factor in breeding, and those in genetics, and that's it. That's what breeding can do. But now, on the other hand, if you start out with a philosophy or with the idea that breeding is everything and training is nothing, which is the current philosophy in thoroughbreds, then and you excuse the trainer from his responsibilities for building and producing and preserving an athlete, and instead say, hey, I spent $1 million for this horse, don't do anything different than anybody else does, because if you do and the horse gets hurt, I'm going to blame it on you, and I'll take all the rest of my horses to the guy right down the shed row, and you'll lose them all, and you're going to have to go look for a job again. And this is what happens right now. Owners hop from trainer to trainer just like a bee from flower to flower. It's not a profitable thing for trainers to be involved in a situation like this. Still, that's the way it is, and consequently, most trainers are real nervous about everything that goes on at a racetrack, and they try to make up for it with edges of one type or another. And the edges that they look for are drugs from the veterinarians, who are just pleased as punch to deliver a kitchen sink full of drugs. You can get into a situation where if you turn a vet loose and you turn a good vet, the top racetrack vet, let's say at Santa Anita, if you just say, hey, take care of this horse, it's a good horse, take care of this horse for me, whatever he needs, give it to him. You just send the owner the bill at the end of the month. Well, the owner will get a bill at the end of the month that exceeds your training bill. That's like me going to give a talk in New York and having my plane fare cost more than my speaking fee. It's a ridiculous set of circumstances. So what's missing in thoroughbred racing is the central technology of conditioning science and all of the other sciences that kind of surround conditioning science, the sports medicine science, how to monitor the progress of an athlete through a conditioning program, knowing what the goal is, knowing what the physiological parameters are that will deliver that goal, knowing where your horse is in line on the way to that goal, knowing what to do about moving him toward that goal when he goes off track, knowing how to find out what the problem is, and then knowing how to correct that problem and go on with the animal, knowing what to do about small injuries and large injuries and cataclysmic injuries. These are all, and knowing how to decide whether an animal even belongs in a training program or not. Knowing how to call an animal early before the owner spends $30,000 in conditioning bills, and then suddenly everyone belatedly realizes that this donkey is never going to run a race in his life. It's way too late to decide 6 months, 9 months down the road. You have to have a method of knowing all the way through if you're a competent athletic conditioner. In human athletics, you have the typical track coach is a master's degree in exercise physiology, and sometimes at universities he's a PhD in exercise physiology. these guys know their stuff. In horse racing and thoroughbreds especially, the trainers, the coaches of these animals know nothing about exercise science at all. They know what everybody else has been doing for the last 100 years. Well, actually, they don't. They don't know that horses at the turn of the century, the typical thoroughbred, American Eclipse, for example, was a horse that would go out on a Sunday afternoon and run match races. And the match races were best 2 out of 3, and the best 2 out of 3 4-mile heats. And so this horse would go out on Sunday and run 12 miles, all of those miles under 2-minute rate of speed, and he would compete for best 2 out of 3 of those 4-mile heats. Today's trainers don't know that a thoroughbred can go that far. They don't know that a thoroughbred can go 3 miles in a day. I've had hundreds of trainers that I've worked with go to the racetrack and do just 3 galloping miles on the way to building to 6 miles, but just 3 galloping miles, and have continuous harassment by other trainers who really love to pay attention to to your business rather than their own business. Give them continuous harassment about trying to kill the horse. They'll call up the owner in the middle of the night and say, "Hey, your trainer's down there he's going 3 miles a day. He's trying to kill your animal." Well, that's not. They just don't understand that a horse can do more work if the work is brought on gradually. So instead what we get is 90-day wonders, 120-day wonders, slow horses that can scream for a half mile but stumble home at the 3/4 pole. When they get to a mile, they just hardly can make it at all. They get to a 1.25 miles, they don't belong in the race. Huge, gigantic, big breakdown race, a big reversion to drugs and quick fixes, miraculous healing devices. The only profit ever available to a racehorse owner is having a competitive, long-lasting athlete at his disposal. You can't make it with a fragile horse that's going to race 3 times and fall down forever. I stumbled on horse racing as a career by accident. I was 12 years out of school. Had 2 music stores, retail stores going in Ohio, and my father-in-law had some standardbreds in the backyard and had been training them, and had on his shelf the book called The Care and Training of the Trotter and Pacer. And I read the book, and once I had finished, there was a lot of good information in the book, but once I had finished with it, I realized that something wasn't there, and what wasn't there was the science of exercise. I wasn't sure that everything was done wrong, but I thought I'd check it out, so I took the book down to Ohio State University, where Frank Zubovich was the head track coach, and Dr. Edwin Fox was the head exercise physiologist at Ohio State. And I said, read this book and tell me what you think about the conditioning processes that are outlined here, and if those processes were changed to better fit with what we know about exercise physiology, what kind of an improvement could you make in these animals? And Frank read the book and got real excited and called me up and said, gee, myself and Dr. Fox think that anywhere between 5 and 15% improvement in performance can be achieved with a better exercise protocol. And of course, that was the standardbred training regime that was basically chart number 19 of Stanley Dancers in the care and training. And what those fellows didn't know was that the thoroughbred training process was much briefer, much less exercise, and a lot less appropriate. And so then I started looking around. We started fooling with some standardbreds down at Delaware, Ohio, at the Little Brown Jug track. The coach would come down and drive the horses. He had a good time doing that. And we started experimenting with protocols, and then I started reading more and more, everything I could, and saw the thoroughbred and quarter horse training processes in action. And what I learned in that 5-year period as I was training up some standardbreds and learning how to apply interval training processes was that here is a billion-dollar industry with a lot of people making money, racetracks making money, horse trainers making money, riders, everybody who was employed in the racing environment was making a living and getting along fine, even though the billion-dollar industry was completely devoid of its central technology. I mean, if you're building athletes, then exercise science is the central technology. Breeding is not the central technology when it comes to building athletes. We're not racing Jesse Owens' kids in the Olympics or his grandchildren, and we're not looking for breeds of people. Basically, what we're looking at when a kid says that he wants to go to the Olympics, what the coach looks for is a kid that has the desire, enough desire, to work his tail off until he gets fit enough to compete on an international level. And a human athlete, this takes about 8 years. It takes 4 years of high school and 4 years of college, and at the end of that process, you've got your Olympic caliber athlete. Now, basketball players, they have to be tall, but they have to be fit. Football players have to be muscular and fit. Baseball players, really, although this year you see these batters starting to hit big, long balls, and they're learning, just like the boxers are learning, they're learning to use exercise to beat their opponents. Michael Spinks is an interval-trained athlete. Mike Tyson is probably the fittest boxer that ever came down the road. And in baseball, you're seeing hitters doing weightlifting exercises and all sorts of different loading exercises to improve their power at bat. There's the human exercise physiology revolution is still continuing after 4 decades of hot and heavy science, rapid improvements in world record times in virtually every event. But here we sit in the horse racing industry where we have a religion established, the breeding religion, the theory that a horse is bred, not made, and the theory that the trainer of those horses is no more than a caretaker who applies little bits of exercise now and then, hoping that the inbred talent of the animal surfaces, his royal blood comes to flower, and the horse goes out and demolishes the competition all by himself. And not a trainer in the country. There are some now, but back when I first started, there was no trainer in the country that had any idea what exercise physiology was all about. D. Wayne Lucas was the closest. He was a basketball coach. And at varying times through his career, he has practiced some interval training. He doesn't have to now, and in fact, most thoroughbred trainers don't have to do any training at this point. For decades, we've had wealthy owners perfectly willing to lose millions of dollars a year just for the pleasure and the pride of owning racehorses. And it's a great hustle for those who are selling racehorses and those who are working with the racehorses. A wealthy owner who travels by Learjet typically doesn't want to get his hands dirty down at the stable, so that's left for the trainer to do. And because the trainer has then contact with these millions of dollars worth of horse flesh, raw horse flesh, untested horse flesh, bought at the marketplace for anywhere from $30,000, we're talking about thoroughbreds here, $30,000 to $10 million. All of that inventory, all of that raw material is turned over to trainers, and most of the trainers, 99, 44, 100% of the trainers have no concept of what exercise science is all about and how this exercise science applies to the kind of athlete they're trying to build. And so consequently, owners of racehorses are the ones who pay the ticket for the whole show. Owners of racehorses, perhaps 1%, maybe 2% in thoroughbreds and standardbreds, make money with their racehorses. The rest of the time they're losing big dollars. The raw material that they buy at the horse sales, 50% of it doesn't make it to the races. Of that makes it to the races in the thoroughbred game and the quarter horse game, most of the good, especially the good natural athletes, come to harm very quickly, either in the racing process or in the tail end of the training process. And so what happens is that seldom does a horse survive long enough to pay for himself and to pay for his owner's investment and pay it back and even make a profit for him. But nevertheless, many of our great superheroes, like Secretariat, like some of the recent Derby winners, like John Henry, have basically fallen out of the sky. They're not horses that were expected to be the top of their class that year. They came as a surprise. And how did they come by surprise? Well, it's an accident. When you if everybody is training exactly the same way, then luck and possibly some components of breeding will out. And if everybody's doing the same, then a horse with a little bit more natural ability is going to beat a horse without the natural ability, except in cases where the training of those animals, the control of the training process is so stupid that those with top prowess are ruined before they ever get to the racetrack. They're allowed to come to quick speed. When a trainer tells you, for example, hey, this horse is going to be an early 2-year-old, it's time to change trainers. As soon as someone gets enthusiastic about racing in May, June, or July, you can count on the fact that your horse is not going to make it to a 3-year-old year, or it's very unlikely that the horse is going to make it to his 3-year-old year. Probably will not make it to the races. In equine racing, the better idea how to do things is built more upon how efficiently one can go out and attract millionaires willing to dump an entire suitcase of money at your doorstep and allow you to go out and... Now, things are changing. In the last several years, we've seen a huge decline in the price of yearlings. And what that reflects is potential owners' realizations that this is a gigantic gamble, that the prices paid for yearlings at Keeneland are outrageous compared to what you can possibly earn with those same animals. And so they're unwilling to pay for it, and the price drops. Now, if there are, let's say, $200 million available each year for the purchase price of animals, and suddenly the purchase price goes down to $150 million, and there's an extra $50 million floating around. What is that $50 million going to go to? Well, in my mind, it should go to better conditioning methods, more time, more effort by the trainer, taking a few extra months to deliver a fully race-ready athlete instead of starting out and attempting to race the horse into shape. 90 days worth of little or nothing, and then suddenly, wham, here we go to the races, and the horse certainly is not fit for this race, but this race is good as 10 breezes, so next race he'll do better if he's still alive. It's changing. What we see right now is 10,000 people interested in sports medicine applications, exercise physiology. We have a lot of little trainers, single trainers that are out there with 3 or 4 horses doing a spectacularly good job of conditioning horses. And these animals are performing far above their potential, their genetic potential. And gradually, as things go on, we're seeing the building of sports medicine centers where all the monitoring equipment is available, so you can watch your horse go through a conditioning program and know when injury is coming on, know how the horse is progressing along that conditioning curve toward the Kentucky Derby mile-and-a-quarter, know how fast your animals are going to be able to perform in a given 6-furlong race tomorrow afternoon. You know, how fast is this horse? Well, if he didn't race last weekend, you don't know, unless you're doing a conditioning job that tells you precisely how fast the horse is, and you know how fast the horse is all the way through the conditioning process. The marketplace for equine flesh is moving from the Keeneland venue to the racetrack. Racehorses, viable racehorses, are what is going to be valuable horse flesh in the next 20 years. Within 20 years, the whole focus will have shifted from the breeding shed to the racetrack, to the performer. And the performers are going to come out of every corner of the world. They're going to be coming from England. They're becoming right now. They're coming from Argentina, where some wicked and weird conditioning practices go on. But hey, they build athletes, and these athletes come up here, and when they get here, they're tough, and they win races. And then, because they're not kept up, they're not kept in that kind of a conditioning program, they slow down and break down. But when they come, they're pretty tough. In England, we've got trainers over there. In Australia, trainers who know that a horse can do a lot more work than the horse typically does in America. And so we've got some pretty stout, tough animals that are beginning to come across the sea and starting to take away some of our big money races. That'll increase in time once the Europeans understand what speed is all about. They're building stayers, and they're building horses that can go up and down hills, but they just don't know what outright speed is, and they don't know how to condition for outright speed. But they'll learn. They'll learn a lot quicker, and they'll have an athlete much more ready to accommodate the kind of conditioning that it takes to deliver speed than we're building over here. Our goal here, it seems, is to try to get down so that you don't have to do any work at all with the horse on the racetrack. If you can just put him in an aqua tread, or have the groom spin him around the barn 5 or 6 times, that seems to be the way we're going. Fine. What that means is that the 1% or the 5% of intelligent people out there dealing with horses are going to have a huge advantage over those trainers who believe that drugs is the only way to make a horse run fast. Now, owners, what's the approach to horse racing that can lead to profit? The first thing to know is that the yearling marketplace is the most dangerous well, not quite the most dangerous of all marketplaces. The 2-year-old in training animal is the most dangerous investment you can make. Yearling are unproven athletes. Half of them, we know for sure, half of them are never going to make it to the racetrack for one reason or another. So you've got a 50% loss facing you as soon as you plunk down the first dollar at Keeneland or any other sale. An owner approaching the racehorse business should start out with racehorses, in my mind. If I was an owner that had $10 million in my back pocket to fool around with, I'd be buying horses that are already racing and already showing some ability, horses that have survived the meat grinder training process and racing process that the young horses in America go through today. So I'd look for racehorses, and whether it's a claimer or a $10,000 claimer, $5,000 claimer, or an allowance horse that you have to bribe privately, that's the kind of animal I'd start out with as a new owner in the racing business. Whether you buy a yearling or a racing animal, the thing you want to look at is not the breeding of the animal, but his actual individual components. What does he look like? How healthy is he? It's better to buy a horse that can have a complete vet check on than it is to buy a horse that is performing well in claiming races and you have to go out there and actually claim the horse sight unseen. There are machines now that the infrared thermography machine that from 50 feet away you can see every major injury on the animal. No matter what drugs they're using, no matter what cover-up they're using, you can see this damage on a video screen. There are plenty of ways to detect what's wrong with a horse, and it's better to pay an extra $5,000 for an animal and have a complete, good, thorough vet check on them than it is to steal them from a trainer who's dropped them down to as cheap as he can run. Hey, there's always a reason for those horses dropping, and more often than not, it's because last week he cracked a bone in his ankle or he cracked a bone in his knee. And they've got him patched together with corticosteroids and whatever else the vet can come up out of the trunk of his car. And you're going to be the guest next time around. You'll own this animal and he'll fall down on you. Even at the yearling sales, when you're buying horses, you don't want to concentrate on the breeding of the animal, but you want to concentrate on the individual himself. How is he built? How well balanced is he? And today, because there is no valid science in looking at horses and measuring horses and coming up with the machine that's built to run fast as opposed to the machine that's built to fall apart the first time it tries to run, there is an artistic sense of what a good racehorse looks like and what a not so good racehorse looks like. And some of these trainers, these intuitive trainers that are out there, Woody Stevens, Charlie Whittingham, Dwayne Lucas, they've got real good eyes for horses. They've been around horses long enough to see that there's a horse that can run and there's a horse that can't run. Horses in motion are better to look at than horses standing still, but your 2-year-old in training animal is one that has been set up to deliver you that nice, quick 22-second quarter, 23-second quarter, and that 23-second quarter is going to break the horse down right before your very eyes. You won't see it, but 3 days later, up pops the tendon, up pops the hot knee. Real dangerous to buy the best performer at a 2-year-old in training sale. What science says about the shape of a horse that is going to perform well is that, or any animal that is going to have speed, is that the legs are light below and the mass of the leg is centered around the joint of rotation. In other words, what you want to see is what everybody's complaining about in quarter horses, that, gee, they got big butts, they got big shoulders, and they got these little toothpick legs that come down to little tiny feet, and that's why they all break down. That's not why they all break down. They all break down because they're not trained, they're not conditioned. We've done studies with bones in thoroughbreds and quarter horses that showed us that the fatter, thicker the bone, the less dense it was, the more porous it was, and therefore the more subject to breaking it was. Meanwhile, the fillies with the little skinny, tiny bones in their legs had high density bone and looked to be quite durable. So for speed, you're looking at mass of the leg around the ball joint, no mass below. And that's the only thing that science knows at this point in time, other than taking muscle biopsies and looking at fast twitch muscle cells versus slow twitch, or putting the horse through a standardized exercise test and getting a V140 velocity at a 140 heart rate, comparing that velocity to the other velocities of the horses, of 10,000 horses trained, and say, yes, this animal, because of his velocity of 13.2 meters per second, is far more efficient than the average animal animal who has a V140 of 10.2 meters per second. These are scientific things that can be done right today. You can do heart scores on a horse. Today you can measure the size of a horse's heart with an ultrasound device, but it used to be you could measure the QRS duration in the EKG and see the essential size of the heart that way. There are hundreds of tests that can show you what the potential of this athlete is and how far along the path toward that potential the animal is today. We have the story of Oscar Barrera with his claimers. Here's a fellow that's dealing with maybe $30,000, $40,000, $15,000 claimers that doesn't train horses at all. He races horses, and he races horses every 3 or 4 days on the average. And his horses, he'll claim them today, he'll race them back, they'll be dead last, he'll race them back, they'll be next to last, he'll race them back, and suddenly, bang, 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 here they come. And at the end of the year, he'll be racing a horse for $15,000 that has $140,000 on its card for that year. Nobody dares to claim it, and it gets better and better. And some of the horses go on to be stakes horses. Oscar earns $2.5 million a year with his own horses as an owner-trainer. Spectacular, spectacular. And what is that? He's just doing something a little bit different. He stumbles upon the fact somehow that a horse recovers from a race. That means it refuels, the tissues that it destroyed are repaired, and it's ready to fire again. In fact, it's at its peak of supercompensation in 3 to 4 days after the last performance. And if you don't get it then, if you don't go after the horse again at that point, then that supercompensation dribbles away and you get back to what you had a week ago. And Oscar somehow, intuitively, through experience, whatever, discovered this fact. Horses can race more often than once every 10 days to 2 weeks. Horses should race more often than once every 10 days to 2 weeks. If you're an owner and you can race your horse 3 times as often as this owner over here, you're going to make money and he's going to lose money. It's just as simple as that. If you take your performer out to perform and he performs 3 times as often as this guy over here, he's going to make more money. It's simple. Now, as an owner, you're responsible for choosing your trainer, and most owners choose their trainers by way of fashion. They look for the winningest trainer, and they don't think about what makes the winningest trainer, what happens that makes the winningest trainer. They just look for the most fashionable trainer at the racetrack, try to get to him. If he says no, then they go down to the next trainer below him and try him. If he says no, they go down to the next trainer below him. They keep on moving down the line until they get a trainer that says, yes, I'll take your nag and run with him. That's not the way to pick a trainer. First, the thing you should realize is that the reason most trainers are fashionable is because somewhere down the line they stumbled into a horse that made some money. And when that horse made some money, they became instantly fashionable, and 25 horses more, higher bred, higher quality horses instantly came into their stables, and suddenly they started even winning more races and more dollars per race. This is the way a trainer gets to be great, is not by doing any training, but by stumbling into the 1 or the 2 horses that make him. And once he's made, then he gathers in more and more stock, more and more horses to train. Some of these trainers have 200 horses in training. And with 200 horses in training, you're bound to win awards for biggest money winner in the country. But again, taking $80 million worth of raw material and turning it into $20 million worth of income is bad business. Bad business. Instead, the way you want to find a trainer, you look, in my mind, what you look for is first honesty. And honesty, what do you know about honesty? The first thing that you know is that a good salesman, or what people consider to be a good salesman, generally is not an honest person. You can tell when you're being hustled. You can tell when you're being kowtowed to and when you have someone trying to make points with you. You can tell that, okay? And now some wealthy people tend to love that, tend to just wallow in the power that type of environment and surroundings brings. They like people making up to them on a daily, hourly basis. And if you want that, then you'll have to pay for it, in the horse racing business especially, because that's what everybody pays for. On the other hand, what you want is an honest person. That's the first thing you want. You want someone who can communicate to you in plain English, you can understand, and is someone who is willing to communicate with you very regularly on exactly what is going on with your horse and exactly what the plans are for the animal, and allows you to participate in those decisions. Actually, it is your animal, so you should be able to participate, but most trainers tend to say, stay out of the barn, send your check, see you in the winner's circle, but please don't be driving me crazy back here on the back stretch. Good record keeping, proper record keeping, somebody that pays attention to what the hell he's doing, writes down what happened today, can look back and say, ooh, there was a big mistake I made. Now, here's something. Any trainer who admits that he made a mistake is a spectacular advance on most trainers, because most trainers never make a mistake, and most trainers know all there is to know about everything to do with racehorses. So if you find someone who actually admits that he made a mistake, or admits that he actually doesn't know everything there is to know about racehorses, you're way ahead. You've got somebody that's far more honest than your typical trainer. Your typical trainer should be, and would be, other than if he wasn't in horse racing, he'd be operating a Ferris wheel at the local carnival. You want somebody who feeds. Flower boxes are cute, but good feed, good nutrition, scientifically designed nutrition, and nutrition that accommodates the workload that the horse is being put through, that's important. And very, very few, including the very best, very few know how to feed proper nutrition. Someone who has, as a part of his daily training routine, early warning systems built in, systems to show, Lucas, one good thing about Lucas is that he's got good grooms who look at the legs of the horses and come up to him and say, hey, this horse isn't right, he's off here, and he's got good scouts looking at his animals. But there are other ways to do that. Infrared thermography is a good tool for every trainer. Should have it. Any trainer that's got 10 horses in his barn can pay for infrared thermography in 6 months of use. You can spot every injury that you'd ever want to see long before it becomes crippling and debilitating and something that your horse can't live with and can't perform with. If you got a trainer who delivers you big vet bills at the end of the month, you've got the wrong fellow. If you've got a trainer, and again, we're talking about every trainer in the country, but if you got a trainer who's using toe grabs on the front feet, you've got a trainer who's going to lose you money. Guaranteed to lose you money. Guaranteed to cripple your horse quickly. The most spectacular find you can make is a trainer who has an open mind, who can actually change his mind about something. Most trainers have tunnel vision. They know 15 things. They're not going to know any more. They're not going to know any less. They know all 15 of those things. That's all they need to know, and that's all they ever will know. Adapting to new information is just not part of 99% of the trainers out there. That's just not part of their makeup. If you can find somebody with an open mind, you're going to do far better. You're going to have a big edge on anybody you're racing against. Now, if you just happen to encounter somebody who has a knowledge of both horsemanship and exercise science, then you've got yourself a good ball game. Then you can do some spectacular things on the racetrack. Someone who knows exercise science and who knows horsemanship and has that intuitive sense along with the mathematical, analytical view is a spectacular combination. They just don't, there's not very many of them out there, but there are a few. and you get one of these in hand and give him what he needs to get the job done, you're going to find yourself way along the road to profitability. Okay, now let's take the view from the trainer's point of view. Where the trainer is going to make money is with the horse that's ready to race, and the horse that's ready to race often. Again, look at Oscar Barrera. Here's a guy that owns his own racehorses and makes $2.5 million a year with race-ready animals. Horses that are ready to race today and ready to race tomorrow, too, if necessary. If not tomorrow, then Thursday. Horses that are ready to come back and come back and come back and come back. And why are they ready to come back? Because he fires them back, and gradually they become ready. They may not be ready for 3 or 4 races in a row, 3 days apart today, and they may break down doing that. Oscar doesn't care. Oscar's not an exercise physiologist. He's not a mamby-pamby sports medicine person like I am. Instead, Oscar is out to make a profit, and what Oscar does is runs racehorses, runs them often, and profit for the trainer is going to eventually be in that area. It's going to be in the ability to deliver time and again a fit racehorse to the races. The decade of the trainer is soon to be upon us. The owners, the racing secretaries, the handicappers, the general public loves to see a trainer who delivers horses that are ready to win races. They hate to see a trainer who throws a horse that doesn't belong in a race, throws the horse into the race just to see him get a ride and just to train him instead of training him back at the track. Your best bet, the smartest thing you can do as a trainer is to train the horse down to competitive time so that that animal can beat anything on the racetrack and then go to the races with it, and make the owner wait long enough to get that job done. If you've got an owner with racing rabies, one of the things you can be sure of is this guy is probably not going to pay his bill. Owners who need to have their horses race tomorrow afternoon don't have the money to train the horses, and they need the money from whatever the horse can possibly win. They need that money to pay your bill. You don't need owners like that. What you want is owners who have the patience and the cash to support this horse racing habit of theirs. And then you take the time to train their horses down to good, solid fitness so that when you go to the races, the first race you come to, you win. There are certain trainers around the country, certain top trainers around the country that are known for delivering a racehorse first start. And they're admired by owners and trainers, other trainers, and racing secretaries. Everybody, a racing secretary loves a fellow to come into the racetrack with 40 ready-to-roll racehorses, or 4 ready-to-roll racehorses. Horses that won't make him look silly in trying to put together a good race. The key to building a good reputation is to have a race-ready animal, to have a horse that'll win. If you can raise your winning percentages from above 20%, you're going to be a spectacular racehorse trainer. If you're down around 10% or 5% because half the horse you're racing are just not even remotely ready to race, you're guaranteed to lose. If you want to pass the buck by training a horse through racing instead of training a horse on the training track in the morning, you will lose. You will lose race wins, and you will lose owners, and you will lose the respect of all the rest of the trainers around the barn. You'll have your horses claimed from you before they ever come to their ultimate fitness. You want to be the trainer who takes D. Wayne's cast-offs and makes champions out of them. You want to be the trainer who, when someone claims a horse from him, the horse goes downhill immediately. That's how you build a reputation. You want to continuously cull your stable. You want to get the losers out of the barn. You want to get the losers off your owner's payroll. You don't need the owner just to be glued to day money on 5 orangutans and 1 racehorse. You need him in 2 racehorses. It's much better to have your owner in 2 racehorses than 5 orangutans and 1 racehorse. You have to keep good records. If you don't know what you did yesterday wrong, then you'll never know what you're doing wrong. And if you injure a horse today, you want to know how you did it. You want to write that down. You want to avoid that next time. If you're not keeping good records, if you don't know the toe length of your horse, if you don't know the angle that he carries, if you don't know the weight of the shoe he's wearing, if you don't know whether he comes out of the starting gate in a rotary gallop or a diagonal gallop, if you don't know how fast your rider is riding him around the track on off days, you don't know damn much, okay? You don't know enough to be calling yourself a horse trainer. You're something else. You're a used car salesman, you're a hustler, but you're sure as hell not a racehorse trainer. Racehorse trainers know what's going on with each and every one of their animals, and if they've got 400 animals in training, they better look at 400 animals today. If they don't, they're not a racehorse trainer. They're not the trainer of that animal. And if you're smart, you never want to settle for what you've got in a racehorse, what you've got in your athlete. Think of yourself as an athletic coach, and think of yourself as a long-term programmer of fitness in this athlete. And this athlete will change for the better if you give him the right direction, if you give him the right exercise. If you do it wrong, he'll go backwards. But always consider your animal, your athlete, on the improve, coming on, getting better and better and better. And always think of yourself as someone who can make that difference, who can make that change in the animal, make him get better. If instead you sit back and allow things to happen and do things by rote and stop thinking but just throw the horse at a race, and if he doesn't fly, tell the owner to drop him down $5,000 and do nothing about the change or changing his abilities other than patching him up with drugs and this kind of thing, you're again going to be a money loser for your owners, and you're eventually going to be a failure as a trainer yourself unless you bumble into Secretariat. And if you do, hey, you're made, and there's no problem with that, and you'll get a bunch of idiots bringing you horses by the truckload, and you'll have a real good time spending somebody else's money. But really, most of us don't run into that. Most of us don't win the California lottery. We're in the horse racing business, and the horse racing business demands that everybody benefit from your activities. If you don't deliver the goods, you're out of the business. Now, one of the things in this particular marketplace that you should be considering is international animals. Don't think of the United States as the only place where horses can be bought and sold. There are lots of bargains overseas. There are bargains in Europe. There are bargains in South Africa, South America, Australia, New Zealand. Animals can be bought and sold over there that need to be reshaped a little bit for American racing, but can be reshaped. For example, the European horses. A lot of hard knockers, good hard legs, big let's go kind of horses that are not lit. They don't have the fuse lit yet for speed in this country. And they can be brought to speed gradually over here. Just pick it up a little bit at a time, get used to those hard tracks, get used to going around the corners, and do speed-specific work. And what you've got a horse that you end up with a horse that has staying power that was built over there with thousands of miles of exercise, and quickness developed here on these American tracks, where you can get a lot of speed and you can get a rider to go around the track one time. Okay. Well, that's a perfect environment to bring a European horse over and go slowly through the speed training process. Look at Charlie Whittingham. He's a perfect example of someone who knows how to take a European horse and tighten it down into enough speed to win in America. And the horses that have ability over there are cheap compared to the horses that have ability here. Now, just the opposite situation is true with Argentinian horses, which are speed trained to the hilt. Argentinian horses will go out in an afternoon and shoot a 3/4, then a half, then 3/8, then a quarter. They might go a mile, then 3/4, then 5/8, then a half, then 3/8, then a quarter. They're just screamed to death, and they do that about every other day. And the ones that survive that have firepower that you can't believe, are just full of speed. That same animal, if you just keep him up, he can deliver you a mile in 1:32. If you stop training him, if you've got a horse that's artificially built, and all athletes are artificially built, they're not running on just their inbred ability, they're running on their level of fitness. And if you don't keep up that level of fitness, they go backwards. That's what happens to most Argentinian horses. They go backwards over here. So if you want to buy an Argentinian horse, you know you're getting speed, you know you're getting firepower, you know you're getting a survivor, you'll give him a good vet check, and then when he comes over here, you drive him hard, and you work him hard, and you do multiples with him, just like he was trained. Watch him train over there and do the same thing, and you'll maintain him. In Australia and New Zealand, you have quite a variety of animals. You have sprinters and stayers, but one of the things you can count on is those animals were built with lots of foundation miles. Just the same thing as in England and France. Lots of foundation, and that's all money in the bank. You can do a lot more with a horse like that. You can do a lot more exercise. You can shape his exercise program. You can change the way he goes to from long and slow to short and fast, or from short and fast to longer and slower, but classic competitiveness. Another thing that you can look at as a trainer is look around at the other breeds of horses, what they're doing with the horses. Some of the things you might not know in standardbred racehorses, for example, the Scandinavians have taken over the trotting business, and they came over several years ago pulling tractor tires behind their horses. Their little babies were out there pulling tractor tires behind, and American trainers just thought that was the funniest thing they ever saw, and there were a lot of catcalls. But then today, Scandinavian trainers own U.S. trotting, own it top to bottom. They brought jog bikes over with brakes on them. Just think about that for a minute. How do you get a young horse to develop firepower in his muscles without going fast enough to crack his knees? You've got developing bone in those young horses. You can't go too fast or you'll get fractures or overdevelopment of the bone. How do you keep those fast twitch muscle cells firing and get enough exercise into them so that they don't revert to slow twitch muscle cells during the growth process? With resistance exercise. In this case, you're using brakes or you're using tractor tires. Resistance exercise can be uphill work. Colin Hayes in Australia has a 3/4 mile uphill gallop. His horses shoot that 3 times. They go up fast, they walk down, they go up fast, walk down, go up fast. And when they get down to a certain time on that third heat up that hill, they're ready for just about anything. And Colin Hayes wins his share in Australia. Resistance exercise delivers firepower, delivers strength. Quarter horses would benefit most from resistance exercise. Think of these crazy people up in Idaho that are racing chariot horses. Now here's running horses hooked to a bike, a cart. Actually, looks like a 50-gallon drum cut in half and stuck on a Volkswagen axle. And these babies, 2-year-olds in January, are racing in these chariot races. And they race all the way through up until late spring, early summer. And suddenly they slap the saddle on and go to the real races, the flat races down south, and come home with these big $1 million futurities in their hands. Chariot horses. Again, now what does that mean? How do you get a 2-year-old to gallop at full blast without breaking his legs? One of the ways you can do it is to take the weight off those legs. Take the unbalanced weight. Take that rider off his back and put him behind. And suddenly those legs take a lot less concussion at high rates of speed. Can you imagine at a training center or a racetrack, thoroughbreds galloping to a cart around a racetrack? No, you can't imagine that because nobody is doing it. And of course, in horse racing, you never do what somebody else is not already doing. But I can imagine that, and I'd like to see babies trained in significant miles, galloping, pulling a cart, pulling a jog bike. It's done. It's done. Thoroughbreds prompt standardbreds at the Red Mile for the year-end time trials. They hook them to these long-shafted bikes, and they gallop right alongside those pacers that are trying to break 149 for a mile. So it's done all the time. It's done on hard tracks, and the horses survive. Certainly can be done on a farm, and especially then you can add the idea of a brake to that cart, and you can add the idea of a heart rate monitor to that cart, and you can say to the kid, hey, go out and drive, and the kid, okay, I mean your kid, yourself, you can take the horse out and be jogging him or galloping him down this grassy straightaway with a brake here and a heart rate monitor here, and you say, okay, I want to work this horse at a 200 heart rate. He's at 180 right now, but I don't want to go any faster, so I'll step on this brake, and sure enough, there goes the heart rate up to 200, and you sit right there, and it's a miracle. Hundreds of ideas like this you can find from other people in other industries. You've got to break loose from provincial ideas. The guy down the shed row ain't necessarily right. Oscar's got a better idea in New York. John Gosling's got a better idea in California. The guy next door is doing the same damn thing you are, because neither one of you dares to do anything other than what the other guy is doing. Well, break loose from that. See what they're doing in Argentina. See what they're doing in Europe. See what Michael Stout's doing over there with his multiple gallops. You'll learn something. Dressage. There's a sissy sport. Dressage. Why would you ever think about watching what goes on in dressage? Well, I can tell you one reason is that most of your exercise riders don't know how to ride a horse. They don't know how to keep a horse in balance. They don't know how to round a horse on the bit. Consequently, the rider is leaning back on the horse's back is breaking down, his rear end is separated from his front end, and he goes ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk down the racetrack and hurts himself doing it. The horse should move like this, okay? And the way he's going to move like this is if his back is rounded, it's concave, and the rider's got a good feel on his mouth, but the horse is leaning into the bit and rounded on the bit and moves smoothly. And dressage people all know how to do this. Race exercise riders at the racetrack, almost none of them know how to do it. So if you think of horse racing as a business enterprise, and it should be thought of as a business enterprise by the owner of the racehorse, and I would imagine that a trainer would think of horse racing as a business enterprise. If you're thinking of it as a business enterprise, then two things. The owner's job is to pay the bills, but his job is to make sure that the bills remain at a reasonable level. You don't want high vet bills. You don't want your training costs to be out of line. You don't want your shipping costs to be out of line. And also, when you go to the racetrack with a final product, finished product has to be a viable, marketable product. The trainer's job is to preserve the raw material, enhance it to the extent that it is a competitive product, and then take it to the marketplace and market it well. And that means winning races. You can platoon horses. If you have a training facility off track, it's a better situation for horses and people to be training at a place like San Luis Rey Downs and then racing at Santa Anita than it is to be at the racetrack in the middle of that cloud of green smoke with your horse's lungs filling up with all sorts of green stuff. Better to be down at San Luis Rey Downs where the weather's nice. You have more time to do what you want to do with your horses in a day. There's not a constant pressure of crime for your grooms and your people that have to contend with. The whole environment is more peaceful for the horse and for your people. So you can get a lot more effective work done at those places. And then platoon in and out of the racetrack. Have 6 stalls at the racetrack, 6 stalls back at the barn, and move horses in. When they're ready to roll, send them into the racetrack. When they're tired and ready to come home and need a little bit of R&R, bring them back and let them relax for a while. And then as soon as they're built up and ready to go again, ship them in, platoon in and out. Have a trainer at the track and a trainer at home. The campaigner and the trainer. The campaigner and the conditioner. You're always striving to build a stable with higher and higher quality, but you can't jump to the top. You have to walk to the top. And the way you do that is to take what you can get and enhance it, increase its value, and market it. And as soon as somebody notices that you're doing a good marketing job, they'll send you more product to enhance and market. You have to call your horses. You have to call your people. If you have people that just don't get along with horses or just can't ride, have to sit up there on that acey-deucey way of riding and put those hematomas on the shoulders of your horses, this type of thing, flatten that left front tire. You got to get rid of them, and you got to get rid of them quick. You can't wait around. You can't wait around for a rider to learn how to ride. You can't wait around for a groom to start looking at legs. Down the road is what they say. Call people just as quick as you call horses. Call owners. Call trainers. Call veterinarians. Hey, just because the vet's nice and smiley and comes down every day and says hello and just loves to pop your horses everything in the world, he ain't necessarily your best friend. You look around for the fellow who knows what he's doing and is cautious and is unwilling to stick to horses every needle, whether he needs it or not. Instead, you want a medical person. That's what a veterinarian is a medical person. If he's a hopper and blocker, then he's not a medical person. He's something else. He's a hopper and blocker and a criminal in the United States. Criminal worldwide. Okay? Just hasn't been caught yet. Trainers shouldn't steal. Owners shouldn't move horses away from an honest trainer, a trainer that's doing a good job. You know, you get a trainer that takes a horse and improves it for you and starts winning races, and you think, wow, now I can qualify for D. Wayne Lucas. And you move your horse to D. Wayne Lucas. What a fool you are. What a fool you are. I've seen it done. It's insane. The horse goes backwards. If you've got a trainer that's built a good horse for you, stick with that trainer and find ways to get that trainer broke loose. If you want to race in California and you got a horse in West Virginia that's good enough to race in California, find a way to finance that trainer out to California. Don't move him out to another trainer. Reward your trainer. If you've got a good, honest trainer that's doing a good job for you, you're one of the luckiest people in the industry. At the same time, if you got a trainer that's stealing from you, you got to get rid of them right now. And trainers steal in dozens of ways. You know what the ways are. I can tell you some of the ways. No need to hold your horse back for 4 races and then suddenly drop them down to $10,000, and this fellow down the street who the trainer's brother-in-law knows real well buys the horse out from under you, things like that. Double dealing in the marketplace, taking a commission from you for finding the horse and taking a commission for that guy for selling the horse. Setting up races, tens of thousands of ways they can steal. You can catch them once and it's over, say goodbye. You go for class. You go for class. A class act is a class act top to bottom. An honest, let's do it kind of trainer is going to have an honest, let's do it kind of horse. Horses are creatures of their trainers' habits. Another thing to know about your horses, whether you're a trainer or an owner, is don't jump the fence. Don't try to hop over into territory that you're not ready to compete in. Don't move from West Virginia to California with a horse that's not ready for California. Don't be dreaming big. Don't move from $10,000 claimers to $50,000 claimers with a horse that's not ready to do that. Don't start thinking grade 1 stakes when you've got an allowance horse. Let the horse demonstrate that it's got the ability. Let it walk up. Don't get it sucked along in a race where it's going to break down just because you think it's 3 seconds better than it is on a mile. Stupidity. Keep your dreams in check. There's one primary goal for everyone who is in the horse racing industry, and that is to provide entertainment. It's an entertainment industry. It's a gambling industry. Hopefully someday it'll become less of a gambling industry and more of an entertainment industry. More television coverage, more money flowing in from sponsors, family entertainment as opposed to crime-infested, drug-infested, crooked industry that currently exists out there. All of us have that central goal as our goal, is to provide good, clean, wholesome entertainment as well as we can, keep our athletes healthy, viable, competitive, provide mutual benefit to everyone we deal with. If we're dealing with an owner or a trainer, do the best we can for that person. What goes around comes around in this world. It's true. I'm 44 years old right now. I've had a heart attack already. I've seen a little bit of life, and I can tell you for sure that what goes around comes around. If you send it, it comes back. And in horse racing, it goes around and comes around faster. So what you want to deliver is an honest product, an honest day's work, an honest job of paying the bills and taking care of the people who are taking care of you. You don't do that, if you don't deliver a good business situation, you're going to lose in this business, and you'll lose quickly. The racetrack is a tough environment, one of the toughest environments there is, the equivalent to the carnival environment. It's dangerous. Dangerous to your health, dangerous to your livelihood. When you go walk into that environment, you want to be armed to the teeth, and armed with knowledge, armed with ability, armed with the desire to work hard and to deliver an honest product. You can't lose by working hard and delivering an honest product. You can lose by hustling your way. You hustle, you get hustled. The worst victims are always the hustlers themselves. They get hurt more than anybody else in the long run. In the short term, sure, you can pick up $1,000 here, $1,000 there, doing this trick or that trick, but boy, after a few years, that gets to be real hard work. It's much easier to make a living and much easier to gradually build a viable stable and a real healthy stable by being straight with everybody you deal with. Just take the time and the effort to think about it and deliver the goods. It's just a little bit extra work, and it's worth everything to you. As an owner, all you can do is treat the people right who treat you right. Try to pick the right ones to start with, but if you know you haven't picked the right one, get out of the situation quickly, immediately. And in general, what everybody says is true in the industry is almost invariably untrue. You can almost count on that. So don't follow the pack. Do something different. If you follow the pack, you've got 1 chance in 100 of ever coming out alive. Instead, do something different. Think about the things you can do differently. One of the key things is applying exercise science to your athlete in any way you can get it done. Little ways, big ways, whatever way you can get the job done, apply exercise science to your horse. You'll just really be glad you did.